The air in the maternity hospital was heavy with exhaustion and fragile hope, the kind that lingers after a long night of labor. Nurses moved quietly along the corridor, their shoes whispering against the polished floor, while new mothers rested behind thin curtains, cradling tiny lives that had just entered the world. In one of the rooms, a young woman lay pale and drained, her body aching, her heart full and terrified at the same time. She had just given birth, and everything about her felt raw, her body, her emotions, her future. She expected comfort, or at least silence. What she did not expect was the sharp voice of her mother-in-law cutting through the room like a blade. The older woman stood stiffly near the foot of the bed, arms crossed, eyes cold. There was no congratulations, no glance toward the newborn. Instead, her words came fast and cruel, accusing the young mother of ruining lives, of being a burden, of trapping her son. She spoke as if the hospital room were a courtroom and she the judge. "You don't belong here," she snapped. "You should leave. This child changes nothing." Each sentence landed heavier than the last, pressing down on the new mother's chest until breathing felt difficult. Weak and stunned, she tried to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. The nurses exchanged uncomfortable looks but hesitated, unsure whether to intervene in what looked like a private family conflict. The mother-in-law took their silence as permission. She stepped closer, her voice lowering into something even more poisonous. She said the young woman would be abandoned, that her son had already chosen his path, that she was chasing the wrong future entirely. "You're rushing to the wrong station," she sneered, as if life were a train the girl had already missed. The newborn stirred, letting out a small cry, and for a brief moment the room seemed to pause. Then the door opened. The unexpected guest was not dramatic at first, no shouting, no slamming doors. Just the quiet, solid presence of someone who did not belong to the cruelty unfolding in the room. It was the young woman's father, a man who had traveled through the night after receiving a broken phone call filled with tears and half-finished sentences. He took in the scene in seconds, his exhausted daughter, the baby, the woman standing over them like a storm cloud. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm was heavier than anger. He stepped forward and placed himself between his daughter and her mother-in-law, his body a shield. When he spoke, it was slow and deliberate. He reminded everyone that this was a hospital, that a woman had just given birth, that no one had the right to humiliate her at her most vulnerable moment. He spoke of responsibility, of respect, of what it meant to be family. With every word, the mother-in-law's confidence drained away. Her mouth opened as if to argue, but nothing came out. For the first time since she had entered the room, she was speechless. The nurses finally moved, gently but firmly guiding the older woman out. The door closed, and the silence that followed felt different, lighter, safer. The young mother began to cry, not from pain this time, but from relief. Her father sat beside her, holding her hand, looking at his grandchild with quiet pride. In that moment, the balance of power shifted. What had been meant as humiliation became a turning point, a reminder that cruelty does not always get the final word. That same theme of unexpected confrontation and reclaimed dignity played out in a very different setting, thousands of miles away, under bright studio lights instead of hospital fluorescence. Robert Irwin sat on the couch of the Today Show, smiling politely, ready to talk about wildlife, conservation, and carrying forward his father's legacy. The audience saw the familiar khaki outfit, the easy grin, the calm confidence of someone raised around cameras and crocodiles. What they didn't expect was how quickly the interview would turn uncomfortable. The questions shifted from animals to personal jabs, from genuine curiosity to thinly veiled mockery. Comments were made that felt dismissive, reducing years of hard work to a novelty act, framing Robert less as a conservationist and more as a shadow chasing a famous name. He tried at first to redirect, answering with grace, steering the conversation back to his mission. But the tone didn't change. Each remark chipped away at the respect he deserved, until the smile on his face grew tight, his eyes darker. There was a moment, a small pause, that viewers would later replay again and again. Robert inhaled, glanced toward the host, and made a decision. Calmly, without shouting or theatrics, he set a boundary. He said he was there to talk about conservation, not to be belittled. Then he stood up. The studio gasped softly as he thanked them for their time and walked off the set. The cameras followed him for a second too long, capturing the stunned expressions left behind. To some, it looked shocking. To others, it looked overdue. Much like the father in the maternity ward, Robert's walk-off was not an act of anger, but of self-respect. He refused to stay in a space where dignity was stripped away for entertainment. In both stories, power shifted the moment someone said, "Enough." Later, discussions exploded online. People debated whether Robert had overreacted, whether the interview had really crossed a line. Others shared stories of their own moments, times they had stayed silent when they shouldn't have, or times they wished they had walked away. The young mother in the hospital would never trend on social media, but her story carried the same quiet truth. There are moments when endurance is mistaken for strength, when staying feels easier than leaving. And then there are moments when leaving, or standing firm, becomes the strongest thing you can do. In the end, both scenes lingered in the minds of those who witnessed them. A woman holding her newborn, learning that she was not as alone as she had feared. A young man stepping off a brightly lit stage, choosing integrity over approval. Different worlds, different stakes, but the same message echoed through both: humiliation only wins if it is accepted. When someone unexpected steps in, whether a father through a hospital door or courage rising in a TV studio, the silence that follows can be the beginning of something better. The maternity ward was supposed to be a place of quiet beginnings, where time slowed down and the outside world softened its sharp edges. Machines beeped steadily, curtains fluttered slightly with every movement, and the smell of antiseptic mixed with the fragile warmth of new life. On one narrow bed lay a young woman who had barely slept, her body trembling with fatigue after hours of labor. She held her baby close, staring at the tiny face as if memorizing it, afraid that if she blinked too long the moment might disappear. Pain still pulsed through her, but beneath it lived a fragile happiness she was trying desperately to protect. That happiness shattered when her mother-in-law entered the room. There was no softness in the older woman's posture, no trace of joy in her eyes. She didn't ask how the birth had gone or whether the baby was healthy. Her gaze went straight to her daughter-in-law, sharp and judgmental, as if she were inspecting a mistake. The words came quickly, almost rehearsed. She accused the young woman of ruining her son's future, of bringing shame and inconvenience into their family. She said the baby was a burden, not a blessing. With every sentence, the room grew colder. The new mother tried to respond, but her throat tightened. She had imagined many things about motherhood: fear, love, exhaustion, but she had not imagined being attacked when she could barely sit up. The nurses paused near the doorway, uneasy but uncertain, while the baby whimpered softly, sensing the tension. The mother-in-law leaned closer, her voice low and cruel, telling her that she would soon be abandoned, that her son would leave, that she was chasing a life that would never be hers. "You're rushing to the wrong station," she said with a bitter smile, as if the young woman's entire future were already derailed. The words struck deeper than physical pain. Tears filled the young mother's eyes, not just from hurt but from helplessness. She felt small, exposed, powerless in a place where she should have been protected. The older woman straightened, clearly satisfied, ready to deliver one last cutting remark. That was when the door opened. The man who stepped inside did not rush or shout. He simply stood there, taking in the scene with a stillness that demanded attention. It was the young woman's uncle, a quiet man known more for listening than speaking, who had come after hearing fragmented news of the birth and sensing something was wrong. He saw the pale face on the bed, the baby clutched protectively, and the woman standing over them like a threat. His jaw tightened, but his voice, when he spoke, was steady. He reminded the mother-in-law where she was. He spoke of decency, of humanity, of the simple fact that no one had the right to abuse a woman who had just given birth. He didn't insult her or raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm certainty stripped away her authority piece by piece. The older woman tried to interrupt, but her words tangled and fell apart. For the first time, she had no control over the room. Silence swallowed her anger. The nurses stepped in at last, asking her to leave. The door closed behind her, and the tension broke like a snapped wire. The young mother sobbed openly now, the baby quieting against her chest. Her uncle sat beside her, offering not grand promises, but presence. In that moment, she understood something important. Cruelty often survives on isolation, and the moment someone stands beside you, it begins to collapse. Far away from that hospital, under the polished lights of a television studio, a different kind of confrontation was unfolding. Robert Irwin sat across from smiling hosts, cameras trained on his every movement. He was used to interviews, used to being recognized as the son of a legend. He spoke warmly about wildlife conservation, about education, about continuing the work that had shaped his entire life. The audience applauded politely, and everything seemed smooth on the surface. Then the tone shifted. The questions became sharper, less curious, more dismissive. Jokes were made at his expense, comments framed in humor but edged with disrespect. His dedication was reduced to novelty, his passion treated as an inheritance rather than something he had earned. Robert tried to redirect the conversation, answering thoughtfully, offering substance where the questions lacked it. He smiled, but it no longer reached his eyes. As the interview dragged on, it became clear that the discomfort was intentional. The studio laughed, but the laughter felt hollow. Robert paused, listening to another remark that crossed the line from playful to demeaning. In that brief silence, something changed. He realized that staying seated meant accepting the role they were assigning him, allowing his work and identity to be diminished for the sake of entertainment. So he stood up. There was no explosion of anger, no dramatic speech. He simply stated, calmly and clearly, that he was there to discuss conservation, not to be mocked. He thanked the hosts, nodded once, and walked off the set. The cameras lingered, capturing the shock on the hosts' faces and the awkward stillness left behind. In a space built on control and spectacle, his quiet refusal disrupted everything. Viewers at home reacted instantly. Some praised his composure, calling it a powerful stand for self-respect. Others criticized him, saying he should have endured it, that walking away was too sensitive. But beneath the noise, a deeper conversation emerged. People recognized the familiar feeling of being cornered, belittled, expected to smile through discomfort. Many saw in Robert's walk-off the courage they wished they had shown in their own lives. The young mother in the hospital would never trend online, but her story carried the same truth. Both moments revealed how dignity can be reclaimed not through aggression, but through boundaries. In one room, an unexpected family member broke the silence and stopped cruelty in its tracks. In another, a young man chose to leave rather than allow himself to be reduced. In the days that followed, life moved on. The baby slept, the young mother healed, and the memory of that confrontation became a quiet marker in her life, a reminder that she deserved protection and respect. Robert Irwin returned to his work, speaking with renewed clarity about conservation, unshaken by the noise of criticism. Both stories faded from headlines and conversations, but the lesson remained. There are moments when endurance is praised too highly, when people are told to tolerate disrespect to keep the peace. But sometimes the most powerful act is not endurance at all. It is the moment someone steps forward, or steps away, and refuses to accept humiliation as the price of belonging. In that refusal, something shifts, and silence, once heavy with fear, becomes the space where dignity finally breathes.